Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another session with Mila in Spain. And today I'm really delighted we've got Sophie and Ryan joining us from Finders International. How are you both?
Good,
Great,
thanks,
thank you.
Alex. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming on board. Thank you for coming on board. So today we're basically going to be talking about unclaimed estates and abandoned properties and how an organization like Finders could help you search for those beneficiaries or heirs, or they may even knock on your door and say they found a long distant cousin that you didn't know you had, and they've left you some money. So that's basically what we're going to be talking about today. Do you want to just give us a brief overview of Finders and what you actually do?
Yes, again, thanks for having us, Alex. My name is Ryan Gregory, the International Manager at Finders International. I'm here with Sophie Smith, who's our key account manager, and she handles cases from Spain and across the Spanish diaspora across the world. She's our Spanish specialist. So a little bit about Finders International. We've been around since 1997. We primarily locate beneficiaries to intestate and testate estates, also missing owners of dormant assets or unclaimed property, as it's known in some countries. Family tree verification is a big part of what we do, as well as I would add over the years, anything which may be considered positive tracing. As long as there's a positive reason, usually financial, for the person to be traced, we have a very thorough UK network, in-house genealogists and researchers, and an international network overseas that can pretty much track anyone anywhere in the world.
Wow. So you guys are quite busy then, eh?
There's never a quiet day, is there, Sophie? To be fair, like the case managers
Yeah,
especially will know how busy it is, and with tens or scores of cases at any one time, and millions of pounds worth of assets on the books to try and find heirs to. It's a busy, it's a niche industry, as you probably pointed to at the beginning. A lot of people haven't heard about what we do, but it's very, very busy, especially at Finders at this time.
Okay, excellent. So the challenges of finding unclaimed estates and abandoned properties. Talk to us about that. I mean, how big an issue is that?
It's a growing issue. In the UK, we've been on top of the issue for quite a while. We work with local authorities. They have empty property departments, some of them empty home departments. That in the UK at least will be sometimes the first port of call where it could flag to a firm such as Finders where there is someone that's passed away. There are other avenues similar in Spain. There's the private client arena where some private client solicitor may come to us and instruct us on an intestate case, or someone's drafted a will and it says to John Smith, who lives down the street 20 years ago, without putting a door number, which is always a great case to try and crack. So it could be testate or intestate, and we could get referrals from local authorities, nursing homes, hospitals, private clients, other probate research companies overseas. And particularly in Spain, we do have a bulk of work which comes from Spain, and it is primarily due to these properties that have been vacant for a long time. And yes, that could be because someone came to buy a property before COVID and hasn't gone back, or they've kind of gone into a nursing home here in the UK and they haven't gone back to Spain. But sometimes we're finding that someone has passed away in Spain within a matter of months or years. The property hasn't been dealt with and it's just left there dormant and, attracting squatters or vermin or vandals. And Sophie especially is on the kind of receiving end of those type of cases. So we kind of feel like we're doing something good for the community in order to get these properties back into play, back into kind of private ownership, but also on the back end of that, we're tracing the beneficiaries who should stand to inherit from their deceased relatives' estate.
Wow. And that moment when you contact a beneficiary and tell them that they're entitled to something, I mean, could you just talk us through that?
It can go one of a few ways. One, someone puts the phone down. That's quite common. Someone would think it's a sales call. A lot of what we do is cold calling. Sometimes you can write letters and you don't know whether they arrived, or you don't know whether someone's moved on. So we're kind of bringing people out of the blue quite a lot. We also in the UK and Ireland have a network of representatives. They're ex-police officers primarily that can go and visit people. It's twofold as well to deliver sensitive news. Obviously, they're trained in that, and also, trying to find out exactly that. Has someone moved recently? So our databases haven't been updated. Have they passed away? Are they in hospital? Are they on holiday? Those sort of things. So door-to-door inquiries is very much kind of boots on the ground in the UK, but also internationally, we're finding a lot of the countries we work in, be it South America, Africa, boots on the ground is often the only way to really do it. So we are utilizing local agents in a lot of areas around the world at any one time, knocking on doors and just doing traditional kind of detective investigation work.
Yeah. So and so what limitations are there? I mean, how far can you go? What's kind of holding you back?
Well, talking about international work,
Yeah.
which is obviously our bread and butter of Sophie and mine, the limitations are quite numerous. Often we receive a case, and very much from the start, we are very limited in information that we have. For instance, often we'll just have a name, a date of birth, a date of death, obviously a place of death, and then sometimes the place of birth, sorry, is just a country, which internationally, if someone's from the UK, probably we can find out where in the UK they're from. The records are centralized, so all the birth, marriages, and death records are centralized at the General Register Office. Internationally, primarily, records are held more locally. So unless you know which region of a country someone's come from, then you really don't know how to get under the skin of the research to begin with. So a lot of what we do in the international team is going a step backwards and trying to find out a lot more about the deceased person. So we're making inquiries around the person that's passed away to try and build up a story of their life. Why do they end up in a particular country that they're in? Do they have family members that are aware of the case? Maybe they just migrated on their own for economic reasons. You know, did they own a business here where we can try and speak to the old company directors? Is there any passenger lists which will show where they came from? And then again, like you have to go over everything with a fine tooth comb because even on a passenger list or a naturalization, someone may have put they're from the port that they disembarked from, or they may just put the closest city to where they're from. So really, it's kind of in international, at least, finding beneficiaries in the first place is a massive hurdle. And then once you get to speak to the beneficiaries, then again, it's kind of convincing them that we're legitimate and kind of taking them through the whole process. A lot of people are unfamiliar with the work that we do in the UK, at least. We were on a TV show for 5 years on the BBC called Air Hunters. So then we were in prime position at that time because we'd be doing the research into the family trees whilst ringing people, and they'd be like, I'm watching you on the TV right now. So the level of doubt was removed, but the further we get away from the TV show being on, it does get a bit more difficult. But Finders is quite proactive in staying quite head above the parapet in terms of media, making sure we're exposed and making sure people know we exist.
So you basically you've got someone who's passed away. They've left assets anywhere in the world. You'll try and trace those heirs, but also at the same time, you'll be looking for those assets. So presumably, like when we get contacted by clients whose relatives passed away, we carry out land searches, company searches, etc. And those kind of similar searches you'd be carrying out as well when you're looking for those assets and financial assets and properties.
We would do on a lot of UK cases, we have an in-house team that looks at missing assets. So obviously, um, especially when Finders is working on a commission basis, it's with everyone's best interests to increase the value of the estate, but it is a standalone service that we offer to solicitors, even if we're working on a fee basis. But that will be a very much UK specific asset search. Internationally, looking for assets, there are some countries that we really can't do any investigation in terms of assets. Spain, through yourselves, is one of the countries, luckily, where we do have the ability to have a look around for assets. But I probably get an inquiry once every other day from a law firm in the UK where they want to do a global sweep of assets because someone had some assets overseas or someone had some assets in a particular country, and then it becomes a lot more difficult. It is literally the cliche of looking for a needle in the haystack. So unless they have some documentary evidence that some assets existed, in which instance it may go through our international asset specialist team where they can actually recover and kind of reconstitute assets from overseas into a UK estate by taking out grants or resealing grants and that kind of thing. But it's very different from looking for assets. But if assets come to our attention across the course of the investigation, I think Sophie's got at least one in the case at the minute where It seems like, Sophie, I don't know, property in Nigeria keeps coming up every day on one particular
Yeah.
case. So
Yeah.
we would
Yeah.
always investigate it.
But and what comes first, Ryan? Does the heir come first, or does the property come first? I mean, how does it get to you?
I mean, any notification that someone's passed away comes to us first. So that could be in all the various methods that I explained earlier, but also we are conscious, especially if finders is going to conduct the work speculatively, we are conscious of knowing that there's an asset. Also, we don't want to be disturbing people if they're going to, you know, if the estate's going to be insolvent at the end of the day. Primarily, real estate is a good asset to start with, but across the board at Finders, we'll do everything from pro bono work to 5,000, 10,000, £3 million, you know, anything in between. So as long as there's someone that's passed away and there's an asset to be distributed, or if it's the pro bono work for the local authorities, then we will take a look at it. And then, you know, the genealogy comes in, the locating the family, and then there's a supplementary work, like you said, then we'll start looking for additional assets and looking for a will. It's an interesting thing where it is kind of cart before the horse sometimes, because often across the board at Finders, we're locating beneficiaries, but then we need to find someone within the family that then has the authority to instruct a law firm that then can ask someone to go into the property and look for a will. And then there
Yeah.
might be a will to the dog shelter or the cat's home or something like that. And then we have to let everybody down that we've located, but often people are quite happy that the last will and testament has been honoured. So sometimes cases fall away like that.
Yeah, that's interesting because in the UK we've got a wills register just like we have in Spain, but here it's a bit more thorough in that most Spanish wills are signed in front of a notary, and the notary here will hold on to the signed copy and then let the civil registry know. So along with the death certificate, once we've got a death certificate, we'll know quite quickly whether or not there was a Spanish will signed by that person. And of course, if you thought the heir was someone who might be on that will, and it turns out that they're not, then the notary won't release a copy of that will. So then you've got
Yeah.
to go and look, and they don't usually help you and say, all right, Mrs. Smith is not on Mr. Smith's in will, but and they won't then say, oh, but someone else is, and they won't tell you who that is. So that's where you guys come in and play a crucial part. But finding out about what the deceased was up to, what he was doing, or she was doing, their whereabouts before dying, and how they manage their lives. That's probably that's an important process, isn't it?
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head of something I kind of missed to say earlier in terms of hurdles that we face is access to records. And as you said, there is a probate registry here in the UK where if a probate has been granted, it's public record, and we can look at that probate and we can at least see who the administrator is, or we can get a copy of the will and see who the executors are and who the beneficiaries are. In some countries, including Spain, like you said, Sophie has cases where we're not even sure the family are actually entitled, but then we need to find someone that has a vested interest in order to access a copy of the will. And then we kind of, Sophie maybe can give a brief example, but we know the case is probably going to pivot to someone else in terms of the succession, but it's the only way we can do it, which is very different to here in the UK. Maybe Sophie, you can give like a very brief
Yeah, I've
example
got
from a second.
a case that I'm working on at the moment where the cousin has signed the power of attorney because she's aware that there's a will in Spain, and we've got the certificate from the notary saying that there is a will there. And the deceased's brother is actually still alive. So, and we don't think either of them are named in the will because she had a lot of friends over in Spain when she passed away and she wasn't in touch with her family. So we're using the kind of the authorization from the cousin to get access to the will, to be able to see. And from that, we have to prove that she is the cousin and provide all the certificates and make sure everything's apostilled and translated, so that the notary accepts it. And then, at least then, they would release the will to our lawyer. They won't release it to the beneficiary or to the cousin, but to the lawyer.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Long
Because
process.
you've got to prove that you've actually got a legal interest in the case in order to receive a copy of that will. Wills are private documents here, and once the client's signed it and paid for it, then they'll collect and usually be giving it to them in person. But quite often a will won't even be a lawyer won't be able to collect that afterwards. It'll be the client in person will have to collect that will. So tell us, give some more kind of Spanish case studies, Sophie, some of the cases you've been working on, for example?
So another recent one that we've had is where the owners are actually still alive and they abandoned their property. It was a couple, a partner and their daughter. The three of them jointly owned the property, and they abandoned it maybe about 10 years ago. And it was completely overgrown. The garden, the inside there was damp and mold. So we then located them in the UK and approached them and asked if they wanted us to deal with the property, and they were happy for us to do so. And I think we resolved that within about 6 months. It was sold and paid out to them. Our agents cleared up the garden, made sure everything was like presentable and fit for reselling. Um, yeah, that's one of them. And then another case that we have is where an owner passed away in Portugal. And he was a long-term resident in Portugal, but he had a holiday home in Spain as well. And we located his nieces in the UK. He had two nieces, and they were not in touch with him, so they weren't aware of his passing. So we dealt with that. We dealt with the sale of the property in Portugal, which was 2 million euros, and then the property in Spain, which was his holiday home, which was being rented out at the time to just a local resident. We managed to sell that one as well, and that was all dealt with really quickly in about 10, 11 months.
Well,
Um, so it's yeah, it's very exciting to be involved in all of that, and for the heirs as well. You know, they were completely shocked and surprised.
That was a good windfall
They,
for those heirs,
yeah,
wasn't it? There's a
definitely.
yeah,
million,
and
couple
it's
of
a
million,
good.
Yep,
I think, couple of million.
yep,
That's a very good find. So, and isn't it amazing? So, so people just abandoned that. The first example you gave, people just abandoned that property and just walked away from it, left it here
yeah,
without wanted. So they just put it behind them and left Spain.
yeah. Yeah, and some of the properties have unpaid mortgages on, or the debts rack up, things like the city taxes, council taxes, utility bills. So they have all of those debts kind of accumulating, and they don't want to be accountable for them, or they just don't, or they can't pay them once they've
Yeah,
returned to the UK. So they just kind of like let go of all responsibilities. And then that's kind of after a period of time, if the properties are reported or the creditors come after them, they then go on to be auctioned by the local courts. So that's
yeah.
another area that we work in as well, auctioned properties.
Yeah, so I mean, we do come across that quite often. So we had a client who, sadly he fell ill. He was appointed. Someone was appointed as his as his guardian in the UK to manage his affairs. Fell behind on numerous payments here, and the property was actually, so it was an apartment, community fees racked up, and then the community took action against him, managed to basically put a charge on the property for the debt, and then force the sale of the property, and that money then was paid into a bank account, which the heirs were then, basically the heirs came forward and prove that they were entitled to that as his beneficiaries, and were able to recover those monies. But yeah, I mean, communities and banks, depending on the community, some communities are very fast in recovering monies and putting charges on property, others not so fast. And banks are, you'd have thought the banks actually, if there's a debt, they'd have taken much quicker action here in Spain. But I think when
Yeah,
there's foreigners involved, they're holding back a bit because they realise how complicated it is. And I've had another similar matter whereby the house was kind of semi-abandoned by one of the partners, and those debts were the community and the bank, and neither of those took action. But we've managed to kind of negotiate those debts, get a payment plan in place, and then recover the property. So I think what the call to action from our point of view is that don't despair, don't walk away from a property, because there's always a solution. It could always be sold, even if it's not, you don't, it's not always in pristine condition, but it can be sold even as it is. There are a lot of investors out there, and if you go onto some of the property portals, and you'll see that properties are being sold with and it occupies in there, squatters, the works. So there is a solution to all of this, yeah.
Mm.
yeah, we've
I,
sold quite a few properties with the
mm.
squatters inside.
Yeah, it's quite common.
Yeah,
So I would say, like, to pick up on your point there, Alex, and what Sophie was saying, is that often Sophie's contacting owners of properties or heirs of someone that's passed away. And often the issue is the knowledge gap or the language barrier in terms of how do I go about this for the layman, just the average Joe in the street, to try and figure out how to dispose of a property in Spain and pay the taxes. People need to be understanding that they need to be instructing dual qualified solicitors like you guys, and then there may be the need for some genealogy at some point to prove who the relatives are and to look for missing beneficiaries. But the most important thing is to get your stake in on that property. And I just wondered, talking about the restrictions on accessing wills, I was thinking, if you're even the most proactive neighbor of someone that's passed away and you want to find out if they left a will, you can't just kind of make your own inquiries because it's kind of behind a privacy wall. So I think maybe in Spain in particular, people are quite stifled with options or a lack of understanding in terms of what to do. I think maybe in the UK, someone will be more likely to bring up a law firm or wander in and say, hey, my neighbor passed away, could you look into it? And maybe they pick it up speculatively and instruct a company like Finders. But I think what else would you do if you're a neighbor? Maybe speak to the consulate or the foreign office. But there's so much red tape, and if you don't speak the language, um, you can really understand how the properties that we even have at Finders is just the tip of the iceberg out of, what is it, like 800,000 to 1 million Brits that own properties in Spain these days.
Yeah.
It must be more of an issue, because it's an issue even in the UK with people that speak the language. There's still empty properties here that people don't deal with their affairs. So I feel like if people know there's a track that they can contact you or they can contact Finders, that means that we can get the property looked at, we can get it to the rightful heirs, we can avoid squatters and all those other things, avoid the asset depreciating. Like Sophie said, if it goes to auction, I think Sophie said to me, you could be losing sometimes up to 50% of the value by it being auctioned off, which isn't
Yeah.
really fair. But there is a sweet spot where, your firm or our firm can get involved.
Sure, and just give us an idea. So cost. How do you charge? So I mean, and I suppose that depends on the type of client that comes to you first. If it's an heir that comes to you or someone who's got an empty property, can you just explain what charges are, so that people don't because I mean, when they come to lawyers, we'll always say, look, we'll give them, normally we'll on inheritance we'll give them either a fixed fee, or if we don't know enough about the estate at the time, we'll agree hourly rates and agree limits on legal costs. For example, we might say that we'll need 3 or 4 hours of legal work. That's 200, 300 euros an hour. Let's agree a limit, say, of 900 euros, and we're going to do this, and that. And in fact, we've got recently, they're not too sure. This person passed away, and they know there's a Spanish will, but they don't know who that person's left the deceased has left the assets to. So we'll carry out that search, and if the heirs are entitled, great. If not, if it's a foundation or association or someone else, then we'll maybe hopefully be able to contact them. But we'll always confirm costs in writing to them, as to be absolutely transparent upfront. Because I would put myself in the position of, if I was instructing a lawyer, how much would they charge and how much I'm going to have to pay out, But I said, just kind of give us an explanation of how you guys work on the charging structure.
So the main thing to point out is that we never ask for money on account. So we work in 2 main ways. One is on a fee basis, where we would give an overview as to the work that's involved, and then we would put a budget to that. If we complete the work under budget, we kind of invoice under budget. And that would be primarily for legal practitioners that are instructed to authorize a fee to be paid from the estate. So thinking about your average empty property here, or someone walking to a lawyer's office or a notary's office, unless we know that lawyer or notary in Spain is going to ultimately be able to pay our invoice, we can't take it from them on a fee basis anyway. So the other option, which is one of the kind of mostly utilized fee structures, at least when we pick up cases or it's from a neighbor, would be on a commission basis, on a contingency basis. So a lot of the work Finders does, it's Finders funding the investigation, it's Finders putting the time and the resources into it. And then, we hope that everything goes to plan and we find beneficiaries, but often we'll find beneficiaries and the will turns up, or we think the estate's worth 100 grand and it's insolvent. So there's a lot of risk in terms of what we do as a business, but we are a commercial entity and obviously it works. Finders is a very successful company and we're the largest company in the UK, and we've been around since 1997. So something works out, you take the rough with the smooth, and that is something that as a company we offer, whereas a lot of companies maybe are not going to put the money into something speculatively and risk losing out. But it balances out for us, and that's the way that people can give us work and not have to pay us anything, because we would work it and we would try and find, like in Sophie's instance, we were trying to find a relative who can help us access to see if there's a will. If there's a will, we would notify them via the will. But otherwise, we may just find out that it's intestate, and we find heirs, UK, Argentina, Peru, wherever it may be. And then we assist with everything through to, putting them in touch with, a firm like yours that can help with the administration maybe, or, with any process of, disposing of the property. And then we literally work with them until the estate pays out. So we're from like cradle to the grave for the lifetime of the case, and we never ask anyone to pay us upfront.
Well, yeah, interesting. Yeah, so that's great. So from our perspective, we can help clients on with the local expertise in wills, with property and the inheritance and process. Yourselves, you can help with the heir tracing and the asset recovery, and actually together, we can offer that full solution for unclaimed estates and abandoned properties. Anything else to add, Ryan or Sophie?
I should just say as well that we notice there can be a financial benefit to any law firm by referring us a case, even if it's on a contingency basis, because what happens is when we find the beneficiaries, we would recommend that law firm take over the administration of the estate. It's not like we would say, thank you for giving us a tip on a case, now we're going to use a firm that we're familiar with. We don't do that. As long as the firm is legitimate and bona fide, then we would kind of recommend them to the family. If it needs a lawyer in the UK and Spain, we can assist with that as well. We have a range of lawyers here in the UK. I would say to anyone watching that's unfamiliar to this type of work, I think like what you guys do to be dual qualified is super important, as we see with anything international in terms of probate and inheritance and real estate. You need two experts, or maybe more than two experts. You need an expert in each jurisdiction, because the rules can be vastly different, as you know, Alex. Tax rules, just terminologies, the way that estates are distributed and everything like that. So, I mean, that's a whole conversation in on itself. But, you're just also to kind of stress from Finder's perspective, the international element of what we do. I think in the last year, we've probably traced 17,000 beneficiaries across 87 countries, obviously including the UK and Spain. But we've got offices in Ireland, Australia, and Canada as well. But yeah, 17,000 in a year, 87 countries. There's not many parts of the world where we're not looking for beneficiaries in any one year. So it's very interesting.
That's very interesting, right? But those figures are amazing. I mean, what just goes to show that more people should be signing wills, and more people should be talking to their families and the beneficiaries before they pass on. Yeah.
I agree. Look, I've had a will since my early 20s, which I think I'm the only person in my friend group that had a will since my early 20s, given the work that we do. But also, I think people don't think about the consequences of maybe, I always used to say, if you don't know one of your parents and you're hit by a bus tomorrow, even if you don't have any assets, your estranged parent may get some assets from the state or the government if you get hit by that bus. But jokes aside, like I think it's something people don't consider, and I think mostly around the world, even in Western countries, maybe 50-50 people that do or don't have a will. People live in their main asset and they don't think they've got any assets because it's their home, which again you can understand. People don't want to think about their own mortality, which you understand as well. But ultimately, be it the BOE in Spain or the BV list, the bona vacantia list in the UK, the state in most territories around the world inherits or receives funds from unclaimed estates. So I think it's not going to be legislated anytime soon that people make a will, but that's the way of the world.
But you're absolutely right. You get knocked down and you're killed on a zebra crossing tomorrow, then and basically the estate will be entitled to compensation. And if you haven't got a will, then not only have you got the claim, the personal injury claim, but you've also got that inheritance question: who inherits? So having your will right at the age of 20, well done on that.
Thank you. I need to get updated.
Keep it updated and actually that is a very important point. It is important to update wills. don't just sign. We don't typically recommend reviewing wills every 5 or 7 years, or if something happens in the family, you know, a death, a debt, divorce, or you move or get married, that anything like that, any kind of fundamental changes in your life, we suggest updating your will or having a good look at that. And I suppose a final point is, if you've got wills in different jurisdictions, which we'd always recommend, so Spanish will for Spanish assets and a UK will for UK assets, if you update your will, make sure that you cross-reference all the wills that you've got.
That sounds good advice. And if there is any need for heir tracing, you know, as well as this global network and UK centric kind of boots on the ground, you know, we have an experienced team of researchers. They're used to dealing with sensitive news, risk mitigation. Sometimes people think, oh, I can't believe you found 30, 40, 50 beneficiaries to this one person that passed away. But often they don't think about proving the negatives. You know, us having to prove that this couple didn't have any children, or that this person migrated, and you know, there's proving the negatives as well as proving who the actual heirs are. And in the UK, we have a tie-in with Aviva that indemnifies our research to protect against missing beneficiaries coming forward. Same with looking for a will. We have a missing will search, so they indemnify a will turning up. That's how content they are with kind of the history of our kind of professionalism as a company. And you know, I just think that even if a law firm or someone administering an estate thinks they know who the family are, go over everything with a fine-tooth comb. I'm not saying don't mistrust everyone, but definitely I would say question what you hear and get it verified by a professional, because Sophie and I, over the many years we've worked to Finders, have definitely heard stories or omissions from people within families, and then you find out that there are people that were missed out of a conversation. So I'd say be wary, just kind of tick all the boxes, you know, dot all the I's, cross all the T's, and use a specialist firm if you can.
No, that's a great advice as well. Yeah, and having an insurance in place is good. So because you could all of a sudden, you know, get that knock on the door. You've inherited 2 million euro property in Portugal or Spain, but actually, who else has inherited that? Who else is entitled to inherit it? So you've got to be careful not to kind of spend all the money before you've inherited it, eh?
Yeah, especially if you can see who the beneficiaries are claiming on intestate estates in Spain. I don't know, do they publish the heirs in Spain on intestacy, similar to what they do in Germany? No, so it'd just be the administrator.
Yeah.
Okay, that's something that's interesting when, you know, you don't know who actually inherited from an estate. You just get the name of the administrator. I think that's a bit of a quirk, but it's something we have to deal with. You know, Sophie has had cases before where, in order to access the assets here in Spain, we need to prove who inherited on intestacy. They need an official document to prove who inherited on intestacy here, and all we have is a grant with the name of the administrator. I don't know, Sophie, how have you got around that, just briefly, when that's happened?
I think the lawyer in the UK provided an affidavit with an explanation of how intestacy laws work in the UK. And then we just had that translated. It was sworn, translated, and apostilled. And then the notary in Spain accepted it.
Yeah. So we've prepared those before. So we prepare a certificate of law. We'd set out under English law who would be entitled to the estate in the case of an intestacy. And I get asked that quite a lot actually from Spanish lawyers. Spanish lawyers will come forward and say, look, you know, the X person died. These are the family members. Can you just confirm who would inherit? And we do prepare those certificates of law, helping out our Spanish colleagues. Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, this is a pretty fascinating topic. I'm sure you've got lots of stories to tell, but the key is basically sign a Spanish will, talk to your beneficiaries. And if you don't, you know, if you get a knock on the door from Finders International, well, hopefully you'll be quids in, eh?
Yeah, if we ring you during office hours, unless it's our mom or dad, then yeah, pick up the phone, because it could be pennies from heaven, as my old boss used to say.
What did he say?
Pennies from heaven.
Pennies from heaven. That's a great one. Yeah.
But pounds preferably.
Yeah, pennies from heaven or pounds from heaven. But obviously, there's a sad story behind all of that because someone has passed away. But you know, someone has got to pick up the pieces and deal with inheritance and find those heirs. So listen, Sophie and Ryan, thank you ever so much for joining us today. We'll place your details on this video, and we look forward to working with you in the future.